What is up, Failroaders? I'm Joshua Thomas, and I just recorded this entire video with my microphone on mute. So here we go again. This video is all about how I got into Final Fantasy Vii. It's my personal journey into the game. I'm also going to, at the end of this, talk about the future of the Final Fantasy franchise on this channel. But first things first, I've got to put a warning out there. And this warning is, of course, a year and a half overdue. And this is, I've been watching tons of streamers play Final Fantasy VII Remake for the first time, having never played another Final Fantasy or maybe just Final Fantasy VII before. So this is their brand new experience, and every single time someone in their live chat or in the comments below say, "You've got to play Crisis Core next." No. Heed my warning. Do not play Crisis Core having only played Remake. Crisis Core should only be played by those who have played the entirety of the original Final Fantasy VII. That's the way the developers intended for it to be, because there are massive spoilers for the original game in Crisis Core, even though it's a prequel. And in turn, there will be massive spoilers for Remake Part 2 if you were to watch someone else play Crisis Core on YouTube. I know it's a hard game to come by. But now let's get into my history with Final Fantasy VII. The reason I felt like I needed to make this video is I'm definitely influenced by hearing Blitz's story on how he got into it. And I remember thinking, as I was listening to his journey, that I felt many of the same feelings that he was feeling about this game. And I also thought about it afterwards, and I realized 3 of the 5 PlayStations that I own today, I own because of this one franchise, Final Fantasy VII. So, and that's where it all starts, is I didn't have a PlayStation when Final Fantasy VII was first announced. In fact, back in the 90s, it was very common for parents to only get their kids one video game console. Like, I remember my mom saying, "You have a Nintendo 64, that's all you need. You don't need 2 consoles. There's no reason for it." That's the way it was back then, back before, the major console wars, before Sony and Xbox and Nintendo were duking it out. And so I resigned myself to the fact that, okay, I'm never going to own a PlayStation. That's okay. So anytime I would see a PlayStation commercial on TV, I was just like, whatever, it doesn't pertain to me. But that all changed when I was at my grandparents' house. I remember where I was when this happened, where I was standing, who was in the room when this happened. I was at my grandparents' house, standing in the kitchen. My grandmother always sat at her spot at the dinner table, and she had a TV opposite the room. It was a tiny little TV that only got an antenna signal for the local channels. And it was such an old TV that you had to change the channels using a dial, not buttons. And this was back when, even if you had buttons, you didn't have a remote. You were rich if you had a remote for your TV. And I remember looking at the TV, and all of a sudden these flashy graphics are on... These flashy graphics were on the TV, and I saw what I could tell was a video game, but I was looking at it mesmerized, and I said to myself, these graphics, I've never seen anything like this. These 1997 graphics. I wish I could remember what commercial it was, and I would have it playing up here instead of this beautiful remake footage. And I remember the announcer was on the TV, talking about, an epic journey, a soldier of fortune, and all this kind of stuff, with all of these modern day graphics, these state-of-the-art graphics flashing before my eyes. And of course, all they showed were the, cinematic cutscenes, in this commercial. But my eyes were glued to the TV, and I think I may have even audibly uttered something like, "Whoa, what is that?" And so it got the attention of my family members who were there. My grandmother sitting at her normal spot at the table, my mom, and my aunt. And then it said Final Fantasy VII. And I thought to myself, oh, wow, that's cool. I have the original Final Fantasy for the Nintendo. I didn't know they were up to 7. And then at the very end of the commercial, that sound, that sound, that that unmistakable PlayStation logo sound emitted from the TV, and immediately I was like, oh, it's for PlayStation. I guess I won't play it. Okay. So I'd resigned myself once again to the fact that I was probably never going to play that game. Fast forward to that Christmas, I'm opening gifts, and I'm an only child, so yeah, I got spoiled. I'm opening gifts, and I opened this small one, and it's Tomb Raider, and I was like, oh, this is for the PlayStation. And I looked at my aunt who got it for me, and I'm like, hey, thanks a lot. Like, if I had a PlayStation, I would love playing this game, but I'll just take it to the store and trade it in. I was so sure. And my family actually didn't want me to open it in that order because they were afraid that it was going to spoil that they had gotten me a PlayStation. But I was resigned so much to the fact that I would never own one that I thought she mistakenly got it for me. And they were all kind of smiling like, oh, okay, yeah, the surprise isn't over with. And I didn't realize it at the time why they were smiling like that. And so I kept opening presents, and finally I got to the big one, and I opened it, and it was a PlayStation. And you know those videos of kids going wild and crazy after opening like a big gift like that? That was me. We just, didn't have cell phone cameras back then. And so I think it was even still a little while longer before I played Final Fantasy VII. I remember going to Coco Video, which was the video rental place in my hometown, and it was there, and I said, okay, I'm going to rent this game and play it. And at Coco Video, you could only rent it for 2 days. So in those 2 days, like, I put 14 hours of gameplay into Final Fantasy VII. And I remember being wowed for 2 reasons. It actually wowed me 2 times, this one game. The graphics were one thing, and I mean, we had 3D graphics back then. There was Super Mario 64, and there were other games for the PlayStation, like Tomb Raider and that kind of thing. But there was still something about the graphics for Final Fantasy VII. They were top-notch. Even though it was just the cinematic cutscenes, the pre-rendered backgrounds were still very beautiful for that time and very detailed. I remember this. And that was the one thing that wowed me. I loved the combat, I loved the materia system, and I was really enjoying the story. And I remember playing it like, oh man, this is 3 discs long, but I've already destroyed 2 reactors. I guess, I'm about to switch over to disc 3 because once we destroy all 8 reactors, I guess we win the game. That was the goal. I was with Avalanche, and we were systematically taking out reactors. And then, you fall, you meet Aerith, and I'm thinking, and you're like, I've got to get back to Sector 7. And I'm like, yeah, I got to get back to Sector 7 and start destroying more reactors. And she gets kidnapped, and we start climbing Shinra HQ. And I remember thinking to myself, well, the game can't be over this soon. There's more discs here, but we're climbing Shinra HQ. We're going after the head honchos. Why is this game coming to a close so soon? And then, of course, we do the escape with the motorcycles, and we get to the end of the highway, and we climb down the rope, and I'm like, this is so amazing. What's going to happen next? And Cloud talks about how they have to go after Sephiroth, and then we enter the world map. And the realization that the entire first 6 or 8 hours, however long it took me to get through Midgar for the first time, was just one location on a world map. It blew my mind as a young teenager, because you've got to think, there are short AAA games nowadays. But there were some even worse short games back then. Like, you could buy or rent a Nintendo 64 game and it was over. Like, you'd played the entire thing in 3 hours, 4, 5, 10 hours was good. But for me to have sunk over, a total of 14 hours over that weekend and not be finished with the game, not only not be finished, but understand that I had this giant story still ahead of me, was just absolutely incredible. And it's something that I have yet to experience since. I have yet to experience the awe of, such a leap forward in graphics. And I had yet to experience that feeling of, oh my God, I'm not almost done with the game. I'm just starting. So after renting it that first weekend, I told my mom, I was like, Mom, I'm, whatever Christmas money and money I'd saved up, I was just like, I want to get Final Fantasy VII. And so she was like, okay, if that's what you want to spend your money on, I got it. And that was the beginning. That was the beginning of my love affair of Final Fantasy VII and the entire franchise. From there, I found out that 8 was coming out, and then Final Fantasy Anthologies, which was 5 and 6, and I played those, and I played Xenogears, and that was the beginning of JRPGs for me. And it wasn't my first, but that was the beginning of my love of JRPGs. Back before they were called JRPGs, they were just RPGs. So, yeah, that's why I bought 2 more PlayStations recently so that I could follow along with this franchise. And I have, I've had minor experiences playing video games where I was like, wow, this is incredible. But still, none of them compare to my first mind blow from Final Fantasy VII. So, and of course, the game and the characters and the story were amazing. And I cried when people died in that game, and I felt that loss. So I won't go any further into detail with that for those of you who haven't played the original. But so what's the future of Final Fantasy VII on our channel and, well, Final Fantasy in general? Well, I can safely say there's plenty to go on. I started playing Type 0, and then before I could finish playing Type 0, I ended up getting 15. I'm playing 15 right now because I'm a PlayStation Plus member and it's free for the Royal Edition. So you guys will be hearing my thoughts on how it is to play 15 after having played 7 Remake first. And then I've also pre-ordered Stranger of Paradise. I had no interest whatsoever in Stranger of Paradise until I saw those recent trailers, the new trailer that came out at the beginning of this year, and the gameplay preview trailer. And when I saw that preview trailer, I was like, it has a job class, you say? How many jobs does it have, you say? You can switch jobs on the fly, you say? Intriguing. And after seeing that, after realizing that, man, this isn't just a Souls-like game. They're really putting a heavy Final Fantasy twist on this and a huge good story. Like, I'm willing to bet the story came from Square and the gameplay came from Ninja. So I'll definitely be doing that stuff. I can't promise I'll be making gameplay videos, as it's not something that I normally do, and I feel like if I were to do that, I would not be able to properly split my time between playing the game and catering to a live community. So we'll see what happens there. But and then we also learned at the 25th birthday celebration of Final Fantasy VII that there may be news later this year of Part 2, which means Part 2 will probably come out next year, which hopefully, fingers crossed, means Final Fantasy XVI will come out later this year. We're hoping. I think that when we start seeing a new trailer for 16, will probably be somewhere around 4 to 6 months out from then. But I think they do want to really push Forspoken and Stranger of Paradise before 16. So I'm hoping after both of those games come out, we will start seeing 16 news. So there's going to be a lot of Final Fantasy VII and Final Fantasy in general videos coming to the Failroad Express soon. Be sure to watch some more of these 7 remake theory crafting and explainer videos, and I hope you will check out more board game and video game videos on the Failroad Express, and I'm glad you could hear me in this one since I actually turned my microphone on. Check you next time, guys.